Yeah. So, so like you said, this is like the first of a series. So when I started writing, I knew I had to make sure that the protagonists or the central characters were interesting enough, both for me as an author and then the readers later on, that you want to, that I want to write about them for more than one book, and also that hopefully would mean also that the readers would like to follow them on a journey. And and I had before I wrote this series, I wrote another series about a lawyer, and it was really difficult to come up with an interesting case and also to somehow inject this lawyer into the investigation, because lawyers usually, they sit with the accused person, or when the police is interrogating them, they're at the court, but they don't have access to the investigation in the way that police do. So, so I decided when I finished that series to write this time like a police procedural novel. But I didn't. I wanted wanted it to be more about more than fingerprints and DNA and like the police investigation. I wanted it to be also about the psychological angle, and I had seen and been a fan of this children's house that is an actual thing here in Iceland, an actual organization. And I found it so interesting and such a good concept that I thought it would be good to have like a psychologist from this organization into the book, because it also not only gives you the psychological aspect, but also this introduction into children. Because here, at least, there is basically not a single murder here that doesn't impact children in some way. It could be the child of the murdered person, it could be the child of the murderer, it could be a crime against the child, but murder does not, children are not outside the sphere of influence by these acts. And so I found this like a very interesting topic to enter, and also that just witnesses in general are not, people remember things differently, but a child is they are the most difficult witnesses. So this made it I don't know, just more interesting to write about, so I was very happy to come up with Freyja to make the police angle more not as overbearing as it would be if it was only a police novel. So I spoke to the Icelandic Child Protection Agency, and because Iceland is so small, I immediately, no problem, got contact with the man who was the head of this agency, and they are the ones that operate this children's house under their whole umbrella. And they were so nice, and I was allowed to see inside. Of course, I wasn't allowed to see an actual interview with a child, but they gave me so much information, both by just describing things to me, and then also I got lots of like research papers where they have been investigating their method. They were telling me like how they approach a child, how they ask questions, and it was just, I'm not by no means I'm not a psychologist or anywhere close to being a psychologist, but I did get enough information and enough understanding to be able to put it into the book without being ridiculous or bending what would actually happen. So I think, because it's not a textbook, but I do respect the fact that when you're writing about like a theme or something where you need to do research, you have to be careful to do it correctly. So my method is to do the research and make sure that you don't go overboard and become like the world's leading expert without a degree. Because when you do that, then you forget, what did I not know when I started? Because most readers will not, they will start from the same platform as I did when I started doing the research. So the trick is to do not too much, because also if you do too much, then you tend to info dump. You think, oh, I've done all this work and this research, and I know all of this, and I want to get it into the book, and then it becomes just boring to read. So the trick is to do enough to understand how you're going to write it, and of course, during the writing, you go and ask more questions, but to keep it keep the flow of the information like normal and not overbearing and completely textbooky. Yeah. It was it was fun, and I like I was mentioning that because it's the first book, you have to put a lot of thought into like how am I going to, so that you don't end up with book 3 and you feel that you completely emptied them of anything interesting. So the only I found it more interesting and fun to write if they were not best buddies. If they were great coworkers, then everything would be super nice. It's more fun if they have a hard time working with each other and making their life a little bit difficult. And the only decision that I made regarding their development as a duo was that I would not decide until the very last book if they end together or not. So that's so during the ride from the first book to the 6th book, I throw lots of obstacles at them and make their life super difficult. And yeah. So I think this thing about having like 2 characters, which is like, even if we go back to like even like Sherlock Holmes, the reason you have a second character is because otherwise so much of the thought process goes on only in the head of this. If you have only one, they keep thinking, oh, it's probably this guy that did it because of this. But then you need somebody so that you can they can have a discussion and disagree and somehow move the thinking forward. But if it's only one person, then it becomes less somehow interesting. And I think having them from 2 different professions is also, yeah, more fun to write and hopefully more fun to read. Yeah, I think that the biggest difference would be the size of the society, or the small size, and the very close relations between people. So everyone who went to school with you, you have all these relatives, and there's just a very closeness between, like, degrees of separation. There's very few degrees of separation between, if you pick a random individual, a random, these 2 people will probably super likely know at least one person together, meaning that if you're writing a book in a super big city and you need some sort of coincidence to happen, that something that this guy knows, start the ball rolling, that might end in murder, or then it's nothing here in personal relations can be called a coincidence. It's not unlikely. That is the benefit of writing from here. And the minus, if it's a minus, is that it would not be realistic to set a crime novel in Iceland where you have like this American kind of serial killer that goes around killing women from 10 years. I don't know, puts a cross on their head, or with some kind of modus operandi. That would not work here, because every single person that is killed or goes missing is noticed. So we don't have that aspect. We could have someone who goes on a murder spree, but not this serial killery type of character. So you have to use what you have. Here, the crime rate is usually quite low, but it doesn't take much for us to be thrown up and down this scale, because we have, I think, basically for the longest time, it was maybe 1 year no murder, next year 2, and then 1, then 3. We've had, I think, last year 7, which, because we're so small and these figures are always divided by the population, so we go like from fewest murders to being many, because each murder counts a lot. So, but it is quite a safe place, and most, if not all, murders in Iceland, most of them at least, they are that the people know each other. The murderer knows the victim, and what is also different here from I think there are only 3 or 4 countries in the world where women are killed more than men, and that's because we don't have these crime gangs that are killing each other, young men killing each other. So yeah, and you need to stay within the kind of the brackets of realism when you write, but you don't have to write about something that has happened. And the way I see it is that you, especially for the local audience that knows exactly everything about the situation here, is that they don't have to read it and think, oh yes, this has happened. They just have to believe, okay, this could happen, and then you're okay. But if you were to write about the murders that take place here, the most common type, it would not even be a short story. It's just, and there's no, it's a decision made in the it's spontaneous, the sticking someone with a knife in an argument, and to have a murder in a crime novel, usually you need the murderer to try to get away with it. But here, usually when the police arrive, the murderer is just standing there with the knife and thinking, what the hell just happened? I should have drank less. Absolutely. And I think crime fiction crime fiction novels are a very, very good vehicle to discuss and bring attention to social ills, because they focus around a happening, like a murder, and why did it happen and so on. Whereas fine literature very often focuses on the individual, the feelings of the individual, and maybe family relationships and so on. So this is, of course, not 100% every time, but crime fiction does give you the opportunity as a writer to bring to light these things that you see are going wrong. There might be just because it's being very much discussed in the media. And this series actually has, I mean, each book has a theme related to something that was going on. And this one, like you say, loneliness and child, like when something goes really bad, adoption and this kind of thing. There is one that is about surrogacy, where because at that time when I wrote it, the parliament was discussing, because it's banned here, you cannot carry somebody else's child, and the parliament was discussing introducing this in the worst possible way, in my mind, which was that you could do it for your sister. So that made me think, my sister has 8 children. I have 2. So what kind of a sister would that make me feel if I had to say to her, no, sorry, this is enough. You can have 2. I'm not going to carry 8 children for you. So it's putting women in a position of having to be always so nice. So that was one theme. One theme was about the anti-vax movement, not the COVID, but where people don't want to vaccinate their children for serious illnesses. One was about a very, very a failure of the system to a child, like how they can fail a child. And there was one about the OxyContin that was all of a sudden the biggest drug here. And I don't remember. Oh yes, and one was about these what was it called? Like where you have men that are discussing, it's a thread, I can't remember what it's called, tran or something. Where a group of friends get together and are talking down females in a sexual way, and yeah. So each one of these books in this series actually does have a topic, and you have to be careful as an author that you don't I have an opinion of all of this, but there's also other opinions, and it's not a political manifesto to try to get people to be in my opinion. So you have to, as the author, bring up various sides of the thing and let the reader decide. I mean, of course, I'll probably be more enthusiastic about my feelings, but I tend to tone it down and allow the reader to make their own decision based on, the information that I can gather from various sides. I usually don't think about other authors, but I try to think that I don't want to repeat myself. So for me, the challenge is to come up with an interesting story with unusual aspects and a surprise at the end that is nothing to do with what has come before. I mean, it might have the same characters, but it will not have the same elements, if you understand what I mean. And I think choosing themes does help in that manner. And writing a book, part of the most difficult part is coming up with the idea. I think, once you have that and you start, then the juices start flowing. But it's to come up with the idea that is, like you say, unique and not repetitive. It's not going to be, the last book that I wrote just with different names and a little bit different. So you want them to be unique cases, and that's the challenge. But like I say, I look at me only, and I don't try to compare myself to what others are doing. I think because I've written like 21 books now for grown-ups, and so it's more about taking a look at what I've done and making sure that I'm not doing the same thing again. I would say one of them is, I think it's out in Spanish now, by Ragnar Jónasson. It was called Dimma in Icelandic. It's the first of a trilogy. He's written one extra one now, but and it's a trilogy that goes backwards in time. So she starts oldest, and then she becomes younger with each book, and it's just really, really well done. And it's about a policewoman who's about to retire, and it's just a really, really good book. Another book that I really admire is by also an Icelandic author called Arnaldur Indriðason, and I'm sure it was published in Spain. I'm sure, but it's quite. It's probably 20 years ago that it came out, and it was called Gravarþögn in Icelandic. It's about, they find a body in Gravarholt. I think it was called The Woman in Green or something like that in English. And it was just so eye-opening that you could write a crime novel set in Iceland that somehow was readable and credible for an Icelander. And it's about actually domestic violence as well. But it was a really, really good book. I like also, I've read, they were in Spanish crime novels by Dolores. Because I'm Icelandic, I always focus only on the first name. But Patricia, you will know her last name.
Dolores Redondo, maybe.
Redondo, yes.
Yes. So I don't know. I just liked her style of writing, the story. I mean, everything. And the fourth would have to be Stephen King. That's I just remember, like, when I was, a young adult, a teenager, and they started coming out these like The Shining and Salem's Lot and all of these books, and they were just Cujo, and they were like my entry into good contemporary horror. You could read horror novels or horror short stories, mostly from a long time ago, but there wasn't anybody like Edgar Allan Poe and this kind of thing. But he was the first to break through by writing horror novels that were contemporary, taking place in today at that time, and they were just so well written. And and because I'm a really big fan of horror, that for me that was just like, oh, you know, great. And I'm still waiting for the horror comeback, but I'll probably have to wait a little bit longer.